Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for attending my webinar. So I hope that everyone's having a great day so far. As you know, today we're talking about how to successfully innovate across continents. So for the past year, I found myself leading a number of projects where my team is split between multiple countries and multiple time zones. So I wanted to share some observations and thoughts that I've had while doing this. And I'm also hoping to share some tools and processes that we've been using to make this work. Before we get started, if you have any questions, feel free to use the webinar widget. There's a little questions tab on the right that you should be able to use to send me questions. I'll make sure to answer all of those at the end. Okay, so before we get started, I'll give just a quickly introduce myself. So my name is Aki, and I'm a senior mechanical engineer at CDP. I started my career at NASA, where I was developing deployable mechanisms for sounding rockets. And the sounding rocket guys, they're really kind of the cowboys of NASA. So you're told, here's $1 million, you're launching in 12 months, go. And this was a ton of fun. So I got to work on about 3 different sounding rocket missions, and I got to be in the mission control center for a few of those. Eventually, I got tired of sending everything that I designed into space and really wanted to work on things that would allow me to have an impact a little closer to home. And so since NASA, I've focused my career on medical devices, including drug delivery and surgical robotics. And like I said, currently I'm a senior mechanical engineer and a project leader at Cambridge Design Partnership. And I'm also leading our design office in Raleigh, North Carolina. So a bit about CDP. We're a product development and innovation company with design offices in Cambridge, England, and Raleigh, North Carolina. And what we do is design and develop products, services, and technology for our clients and help our clients bring those products and services to market. We're made up of we have a team of about 150 people from really diverse backgrounds and skill sets. So we have engineers, designers, scientists, researchers, mathematicians, anthropologists. And really we try to hire people who can bring something new to the table and help us take a more holistic approach to product development and really understand different aspects of users, technology, and markets. And we've been doing this for about 25 years. And in that time, we've developed over 1,000 products. And I'll just quickly share a few examples to give a flavor of the type of thing that we do. So this is Claris, which is a system that we invented and developed to help improve adherence rates with auto-injectors. So the platform automates key tasks for the user. It stores the drug at the right temperature, warms up the drug for injection, and prepares the injector with the correct needle and medication. And it also reminds the patient to take the medication and disposes of the needle afterwards. We also developed the Pelican Sun, which was the first device to deliver fully automated and virtually pain-free lancing for blood glucose monitoring. And what you see here is a disposable cartridge that holds the 50 lancets. And interestingly, Pelican was also the first CDP project that relied on transcontinental innovation. So the client team was in California and the CDP team was in Cambridge. And with the time difference, it left us with about an hour or 2 of workday overlap. And what that meant was that the communication and the handovers between the 2 teams had to be very clear and effective. And when you get that right, it's possible to essentially have a double workday. And when you get it wrong, it's quite easy to end up wasting a day by moving in the wrong direction and then having to backtrack the next day when you've realized that you'd misunderstood the other team. RowSafe was also an interesting project. So a few years back, RowMedic had an issue. Their products didn't meet some of the new European regulations around needle stick injuries. And their worst case scenario was that they would have had to redesign each product and revalidate new assembly lines, which would be very costly and time consuming. So we designed RowSafe, which is a retrofittable needle safety device. And this allowed RowMedic to meet the new regulations without touching a single assembly line. And it saved RowMedic time and money, and we won a couple design awards for this, which was really neat. So like I said, our headquarters have been in Cambridge, England for 25 years. And since February, we've also been operating the growing design center in Raleigh, North Carolina. And for 10 months, we've been running projects that often span across the two sites. And there's obviously challenges that come with this, but there's also huge advantages in being able to leverage a team in two different geographic locations. So today I want to look at this from three angles. So first, what are some of the benefits of having a global design team? So why would you want to do this in the first place? Second, what are some of the challenges that come with doing so? And finally, what are the processes and tools that we've been using to overcome the challenges and use transcontinental design to our advantage? So let's start with benefits of having the design team that spans across geographies. So for CDP, we're working with an increasingly global client base, and we're developing solutions to an increasingly global set of problems. And there's cultural nuances that come with this, depending both on where the client's located as well as what their target market is. So even between two English-speaking countries, you have differences in the norms and expectations. So for example, if an American client says to me, "Oh, that's interesting," typically that means that he's interested in my idea. Whereas if a British client tells me, "Oh, that's interesting," usually it means that they don't like my idea, but they're a little bit too polite to tell me. Another example, so some British clients may prefer to have lunchtime meetings at the pub, and they may expect me to have a couple pints of beer during the meeting. And so far, this hasn't really been my experience in America, but maybe I'm just working on the wrong projects. The point being, expanding our cultural footprint does make us better at understanding cultural variations. If we're looking inward, our ability to innovate is directly linked to the diversity of thinking that we have within our team. So expanding our footprint to the US does mean we have access to an expanded and diversified talent pool. And like I said at CDP, we don't really hire for cultural fit, we hire for cultural contribution. And with engineering education in Europe and US being very different, engineers from the two different sites, they do approach problems differently. And so far, our first hires in the US have been making huge contributions and increased our diversity of thinking. On a logistical level, having a technical site in the US is really positive for our relationships with our US clients. So both geographically and schedule-wise, we're closer to our US clients. And it means it's easier to organize regular face-to-face meetings. It's easier for clients to stay engaged in the product development process. And both CDP and the clients save money on travel and lower their carbon footprint, being able to communicate closer to each other. And even clients who've worked with us in the past in Cambridge have appreciated the added flexibility that having the US presence has brought us. Another logistical benefit is the extended workday, which I mentioned earlier. So when we're working to tight deadlines, working in two time zones can actually accelerate the amount of progress you can make in one day. So when, for example, we have a project currently that's spanning the two sites, and the Raleigh team will spend the day working on the project, and throughout the day, come up with a number of questions, some come across new problems, and by the end of the day, we might send an email to the team in Cambridge and say, "Hey, we don't know what to do about this." And by the time that we wake up, they'll have created test data, maybe they've built a new prototype, but we'll usually have an email with some answers waiting for us, and it means that we can start at a better point than when we left off. And finally, when you're splitting a team in two time zones, it actually mitigates the problem of having too many cooks in the kitchen. So realistically, there's times when it's not effective to have 11 engineers working on the same design at the same time. But if we split our team to 5 engineers in the UK and 6 engineers in the US, the staggered time zones allow the team to work more effectively and not step on each other's toes. So there's clearly benefits to transatlantic innovation, but there's also challenges that come with having a team that's separated by time and space. So let's quickly talk through some of those. So starting with physical separation, when the team's not all at the same location, it's much harder to have informal, unplanned meetings within the team or to work on the same prototype at the same time. In terms of temporal separation, when the team's not working on the same schedule, you have a limited window when communication is possible. And outside of that window, you can feel a little bit like Apollo 13 on the dark side of the moon. You're just kind of hanging in there, waiting to come across to the other side when you can finally make contact again. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a NASA joke. I'll try to keep those to a minimum. The point being, there's inherent limitations that you need to work around when you're separated by time and space. Talking about culture again, how do you grow and cultivate the same culture of innovation across two countries and make sure the cultures don't grow apart and become incompatible? I spent almost 4 years at our Cambridge office, and I saw firsthand how the culture and team dynamics they're built through all the small interactions that happen on a daily basis. So everyone has lunch together. There's various evening socials. People bike to work together, and there's things like the CDP running club. There's also friendships that form just from people living near each other and being part of the same community. And I genuinely believe this is the stuff that builds strong teams that can work together to get through stressful and difficult challenges. And it's hard to achieve the same thing just using video conference, so definitely a challenge. On a project level, keeping a global design team aligned is not easy. When the team's co-located and everyone's sitting in the same room, you're constantly nudging each other very slightly and almost subconsciously keeping each other aligned. But when you're not in the same location and not sitting in the same room, this is not as easy. And if you're not careful, you can end up with a mismatch where the two teams aren't quite on the same page and they're not quite working on the same mission. So when we opened the Raleigh office in February, we'd mapped out these challenges and we started brainstorming ways to address each challenge. And as we've been running projects across the two sites, the way that we do things has continued to evolve. So let's talk a little bit about solutions. So the first challenge that we wanted to tackle was the potential cultural mismatch that could develop between the two sites. And CDP decided this is so critical to get right that the company invests to make face-to-face time happen in various ways. So everyone on the Raleigh team, we've spent a few weeks in Cambridge already this year. And this helps keep the cultures in sync and make sure everyone on the teams know each other. We've also had a number of people travel through the Raleigh office when they're visiting US clients, which kind of does the same thing. Because once you've met someone face-to-face, I find it's usually much easier already to talk on the phone and you understand each other better. We've also been doing secondments where engineers and designers from Cambridge work out of the Raleigh office for anywhere from 1 to 2 months to half a year. And this also helps cultivate the right culture as the Raleigh site grows and new team members join the Raleigh team. The challenge around time difference we solved with the strategic decision to place the US office on the East Coast. So this gives about 4 hours of workday overlap between the two offices, which is enough to collaborate and stay aligned while still giving the benefits of having the US office in the first place. And so a typical day might look a little bit like this. So the UK team starts their day a little earlier. They'll pick up from where the US team left off. They'll keep working on the project, and 8 a.m. East Coast time, we might have a virtual brainstorm between the two sites or some kind of workshop. The two teams continue to work, and then at the end of the UK day, we usually have a daily team stand-up meeting, which also acts as a kind of handoff so that the US team can keep working towards the challenges that the UK team had come across. And this actually relates to the next point. So talking about team alignment, this comes to being disciplined with your communication and documentation. So I'm currently leading a project with engineers both in Raleigh and Cambridge. And my goal has been to create a framework that empowers the team to take big steps and make progress without me being in the room. Because if I have to rely on micromanagement to lead a global team, that team's going to fail. So what does the structure look like? We use a custom Kanban tool that tracks every feature, function, and requirement that we need to deliver on, and which team member owns each item. So again, this means we're not stepping on each other's toes while we're, I guess, on the dark side of the moon. And we also have the daily stand-up meeting where we share and review everyone's progress. And this is really what allows for the light nudges and self-corrections that are needed to make sure we do stay aligned and we're on the same mission. And the final point I want to talk about is a big one. So it's the daily communications and collaborations, and how do you make this as painless as possible? So anyone who's ever used Skype before, you've probably had the experience where for whatever reason, the person on the other side couldn't hear you. It's quite difficult to sometimes troubleshoot to figure out whose microphone or speaker isn't working. Maybe when you try to talk, you get the robotic echo kind of coming back at you. And you've probably had the video freeze a few times, and it never seems to happen at a very flattering time. So the only way that CDP can operate across two sites is by making sure that this doesn't happen. And instead, when we have people in a room in Raleigh, and people in a room in Cambridge, we do everything we can to literally merge those two rooms together. So we set up our rooms to have crystal clear audio with no delays or lags, so that you can talk to each other like you're in the same room. In terms of video, our rule generally is to have enough screens and cameras so that everyone can see and be seen. And again, it helps everyone feel part of the kind of virtual meeting. And we're not really promoting any specific brand of product, but I'll just mention a few ones that have worked well for us. In terms of audio, we use a lot of these plug-and-play Jabber devices, which are super handy. I always have one in my bag, and it provides great two-way audio very quickly. And it really does, it's a huge improvement over just having laptop or phone audio. We found a number of webcams that work well. A few of the Cambridge rooms are kitted with these Logitech video and audio systems, which are fantastic. And finally, we use the Zoom video conference platform to tie everything together. And Zoom's amazing. As far as I can tell, you can connect an infinite number of video and audio sources to a single Zoom meeting without any issues. We also have a dedicated room in Cambridge that acts as a portal between Raleigh and Cambridge. So the project team can actually walk in and be in the virtually be in the same room and immediately be connected without requiring too much setup. I think this is really the first step, was to remove any barriers wherever we can and help merge the two rooms together without requiring too much effort from either side, and make the communication as easy as possible. But the second step after getting all the tools in place was getting people comfortable and confident enough to use the tools and use the process, that you actually stop noticing the tools and process because you know that they work, and it just allows you to focus on the collaboration itself, which really is the goal. So we have an evolving best practices document that we update as we continue to figure out new and better ways to work together. So for example, recently we've been using mobile phones as quick roaming video cameras to just quickly share sketches in brainstorms or prototypes in the lab, which it's quite crude, but it's a really nice and informal way to share your work. So when you look at this, it all boils down to quite fundamental things and doing small things correctly. So where are we now? We're constantly collaborating between the two sites. We're running workshops and brainstorms across the two sites, and we're making sure that the new US presence is something that energizes the Cambridge team and allows us to deliver higher quality of work. And at CDP, we're always testing boundaries and questioning our assumptions. And the Raleigh office really started as a small experiment to prove a hypothesis that not only is it possible to innovate across an ocean, but it's actually advantageous to do so. And 10 months into this, all the signs really suggest that the hypothesis was correct, which is pretty exciting for us. And that's really where I'm going to stop. So again, thanks for attending the webinar. I hope it was useful and interesting. And if you do have any questions, I'm happy to hang out here for a little bit longer, and you can post them in the questions tab in the webinar widget. Thank you.